at his funeral that he lost his neshama in Auschwitz. He was the one who committed suicide. Oh no. I'm talking about Prima Levi. No, I'm sorry. Well, Prima Levi, he said that he lost his neshama in Auschwitz.
From Italy.
When he committed suicide, they buried him in a normal cemetery because the neshama wasn't there. He lost it.
Okay.
Wow. Did I understand? No.
It's good.
Something's
It's better if we don't understand. When we don't understand, we're closer to truth than when we do understand. You understand what I'm saying?
Understanding is liberating, actually.
Yeah, yesh v'yesh. When it comes to Mamala, you want to understand. When it comes to Seviv, you want to not understand. Huh? Yeah. אתה תפסת את העניין? wegen was? Dem? Ah ja. Shabbos Nifni. Also in der niedrigste Art kann man dort, wo Akeli, ja. No Elam Matayfus gemein. Chassidus effend auf der Welt, ha? Jede nekuda, kol nekuda מחוויית האדם בחיים מקבל פנימיות חדשה. הנקודה של אינדיבידואליות מקבל הערה חדשה. הנקודה של ביטל מקבלת הערה חדשה. ידע נקודה, זה לא קוטע שום חלק מהחיים. It's not emes and them, it's not emes and them, it's not emes and them, it's not emes and them. Yeah. אתה עוד תשתגע מהמיימר הזה. Okay, good morning. Ist verstanden ein bisschen? Okay. Because that's the word. Soivav is also mahava. Fakert, Soivav is mahava more. The way of his havos is a way that it fills it. That it becomes the toichen of the nivra. Fakir, the main hishavos comes from Soivav, we'll see. But the way it happens to Mamal is in a way that it fills it. We'll try to fills it. When we say it fills it, it means it's inside of it. That's what we say. It fills it, right? It fills. So what does it mean in toichen? It's the way the hishavos happens in a way that it becomes the toichen of the nivra. That is his geder. When he says ich, that's his ich, that's the real ich, that's his gather. We're talking about a healthy eye, not a dysfunctional eye. Yeah.
What's the time that you should give to this? So this is an acquired taste. Not born, at least I wasn't born. For me, it's like only this stuff. So how long do you until you understand, until you enjoy it? Why are you laughing? I'm just trying to, I'm being honest,
Your shaila is a shaila from Mamala and there's Soivav, so it's kol chadla from Shura delay.
I'm not asking for a time on a month. I'm trying to understand. You know what? Let me rephrase. What steps do you need to take other than listen and learn?
This is a good shaila. I'm impressed that you're asking it. Most people don't know that you have to ask this. It takes them 3 years to know that you have to ask this. They think it's a shalashudas word. Yeah. Okay. But that's
the first step.
no, I'm saying, but I've betracht the Indian, but there's a lot to say about it. But this is a good haskalah, listen. It's a good haskalah. Everything begins with something, you know. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Right? There's people who at the age of 40 start learning Aleph Beis. Bali Tshuva, Aleph Beis, Chumash, Rashi, Gemara. Bakiva, yeah, but I'm saying in our generation also, Eden who are secular, they come to yeshiva, this. And it's very frustrating. Imagine you're 40 years old, yeah? They're sitting in a shir, guys quoting Gemaras, and they don't know, you know what I'm talking about. It's one of the things that could turn a person off very, very badly, because you want to be successful. He has an MBA, he has a PhD in business. Yeah, he's a multimillionaire, he owns 3 homes. He sits at a shir, he doesn't know Aleph Beis. You don't want to be, and he's 40 years old, he's 45 years old, he's 60 years old. And a lot of people, they shut down as a result, because it creates so much anxiety. You know what, 60 years I wasted my time. So it takes a lot of humility to be able to stick it through. I once saw there was a Baal Tshuva who wrote a letter, unbelievable, it left such an impact on me. There was a Baal Tshuva who wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he's 50 or 60 years old and he never learned Yiddishkeit. And he's so frustrated, you know, especially when it comes to Gemara. Reading Hebrew is hard enough. But even if you master Hebrew, when it comes to Gemara, it's a different way of thinking, you know. It's not, yeshiva boys don't know it. It comes to von Luzern. But if you weren't in your yeshiva, the way of learning Gemara is different. It's not, you don't have, it's nowhere in the world like that. So he said it's very, very frustrating how much he doesn't understand. So the Rebbe wrote back to this person. He says, trust me, that a person who learned his whole life is even more frustrated by what he doesn't understand. If you learned your whole life, really you're even more frustrated. And the point is that it's not about how much you know, it's about the journey. You know, you do what you can. But that was an unbelievable vart. The frustration you have, I have much more, he was saying. Because when you do understand and you see how much you don't understand, you're even more frustrated. Because you can't say anymore, oh, I don't understand. I actually do understand. And I still don't understand. It's a very deep vart. In other words, the Gabi infinity, the one who learned his whole life is even more frustrated. Okay. V'yesh laharich b'zeh. B'treidin, yeah. Okay. Psachim Kuf Tezayin Amud Aleph, right? On the bottom, after the Mishnah. It's an interesting thing to point out how sometimes a mistake, or at least what some people thought was a mistake, created such an interesting commotion in halacha. Okay, we learned yesterday about the charoises. Kuf Tezayin, Amarav deals with the charoises. If it's a mitzvah, if it's just because of poison, and if it's a mitzvah, what's the mitzvah? Is it for the apple? Is it for the clay? Reb Levi, Reb Yochanan. And the Brisa says you have to mix in some spices, tavelin, which look like straw. They look a little bit like straw, zecher leteven. And Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok said that the window vendors in Jerusalem used to call it a mitzvah. They used to say, come buy spices for a mitzvah and so forth. I just want to point out here, one of the Rashbams, if you'll take a look at the Rashbam, Tavlin. You see Tavlin? It's right before the Mishnah. Right before the Mishnah of Ekana ben Shoyel. You see, there's the Rashbam Tavlin. The Gemara says that you have to put in Tavlin into the charaisis. Tavlin means spices. Like some people would put in ginger, some people would put in cinnamon. In later generations, a lot of people don't use these things, but that's what's brought in the Poskim. So you see the Rashbam says Tavlin, Psamim shematilin b'charaisis, Zecher leteven. Spices that they put into the charaisis to commemorate the straw, which the Jews had to collect in order to form the bricks which they used for the construction of the edifices of Parai. And then the Rashbam adds, V'cheres shekoichin by hadek zecher letit. What does the word cheres mean, you know? Cheres, clay cheres is called pottery made of earthenware. Basically, you take mud, you take earth, you mix it with water, and you mold it. You ever see how they make earthenware pottery? You mold it, and you bake it in an oven or under the sun, and that's called clay cheres. Cheres means earthenware. It's shards of earthenware. So when you read the Rashbam, he says, v'cheres, you put in spices, v'cheres, you take earthenware, cheres, basically shards, pottery shards, shekoichin by hadek, which you grind well, like it says by the Ketores, they grind it well. Hadek means very, very dak, very, very thin. Zecher letit, at a zecher for tit. When you read this Rashbam, what else do you have to put in the charaisis besides food? You got to put in cheres. You got to basically put in earthenware pottery, grind it up very, very well, because you don't want to eat. You don't want to eat mud, but grind it up very well, and that's the tit. That's what they use. That's part of what you use as the mortar, as the clay to build the Pisum and Ramses. That's how you could tighten the Rashbam here. That they put it in Zecher, v'cheres shekoichin behadek Zecher letit.
That could be a mistake because he probably meant to say
So one of the Rishonim, the Shibbolei Haleket, in Simon Reishut Ches, he writes, based on this Rashbam, that as a result of this, there became a minig that people would take a little clay or take a brick and grind it up very, very well and put it into the charaisis, zecher letit. Okay, the Beis David in Simon Reish and Gimel writes that in Saloniki was a very big Jewish community that's in Greece. Saloniki, Greece. He says the elders of Saloniki testified that they always put into the charaisis. They had a rock. They would grind up a rock, that a special rock, they would grind it up and they would put that into the charaisis. A little bit rock, based on this. Okay. Comes the Birkei Yosef, the Chidah, the Birkei Yosef in Arachayim and Hilchas Pesach, and he says as follows, that there was one of the Mekabolim, was known as Maharam Dilun Zano. He writes on this Shibbolei Haleket that you put in some clay or some bricks. He says like this, Nivhalti mereois shigoyin kazeh. I was astounded from seeing this craziness, this meshagas. Ulai gam bepurim yoitziu mehem dam zeichel gzeres hariga. Maybe on Purim we should start extracting blood in order to commemorate all the Persian anti-Semites who were slain. Halitzrichen lahape chayagan l'sasin v'arabetoiv. Our job is to transform the mourning into joy and the negativity into positivity. We don't celebrate with blood on Purim, and we don't celebrate with clay and cement and mortar on Pesach. And therefore, the Birkei Yosef says that this minig was created based on the Rashbam. However, the Rashbam was written without a printing press. There was no word processor. It was written in handwriting. And the one who copied the manuscript made a mistake. Instead of v'cheres, it really said v'charoisus. It said charoisus, and he turned it into cheres. Now I'm saying it could have been the Rashbam wrote cheres, and on the samach he put an apostrophe not to finish the word, or maybe he finished the word but the person didn't see it. So cheres became cheres. So he says really what the Rashbam meant was v'charoises shekoitchen by hatev zeichelatit. The charoises you have to grind up well. You don't eat whole apples. You don't need whole pears. You don't need whole walnuts. You grind it. You don't need whole. You grind it up. You grind up the charoises into, it's not mamash a liquid, but it's close to a liquid. You put in wine, etc. And the word charoises was exchanged with the word cheres. That's why today in most Rashbams, probably in your Gemara also, they have on the word cheres a note. Yeah, do they have a letter on it where they correct it and they say that it has to be charoises. And the truth is that he is absolutely right. How do I know he's absolutely right? Because if you look in Rashi, Rashi was the grandfather of the Rashbam. That's on top. The same Tavlin. On Tavlin, Rashi says, Yerokas shematilin b'charoises eichel etevin, v'charoises shekoitshim b'hodek zeichel etit. Rashi, this is he's quoting his grandfather verbatim. So to say that the Rashbam was quoting him verbatim and he changed one word from charoises to cheres would not be logical. So this was pushed a mistake. But it's fascinating that Lepoil, this minig became, they would put in earthenware or mud or bricks or rock into their charoises, grind it up very, very thin. Just I wanted to make a comment because it's just interesting how that word generated a whole discussion. They may have seen the Rashi, but they thought that the Rashbam was saying something new.
No, he is actually specifying Rashi because he says Rashi says Yerokas and he says B'samim.
That's true. He changes from Yerokas to Psamim. That's true. That's true. He does make a change. So perhaps they thought there was a second change. I'm just saying from Rashi's Lashon is a very strong, I can't say it's 100%, but it's a very strong source to say that the Rashbam really wrote charoises and somebody made a mistake. I guess, but he said it's a loy shamati nivhalti mirois shigoyin kaza.
But it's not changed within the Rashbam itself ever, even though we know it's clearly a mistake.
Yeah, and we should say that Shibali Haleket was one of the Rishonim. So it's just, but he attacks it so heavily. Nivhalti, how can you say such a thing?
How does the Shibali Haleket deal with the concept that you don't change a minute even if it's, you don't see a basis for it, we think it's a mistake?
So that's what he believes. He believes that it was completely misguided. Like,
How does he look at Minhagim, not him in particular? How does the earlier?
well, I think we often make a mistake. The value of a minig is that it has a basis. If it's a meshagas, it's not a minig, it's a meshagas. But it has to be a...
So, in other words, how do you have the sources? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
And if the source is meaningless,
yeah.
then it's not a minute.
It's not a minig, yeah. Let's face it, sometimes people are OCD. And any type thing that they hear, even if they heard wrong, it becomes a minhag. And you know, and sometimes the whole family suffers from it. And there's no need for it. It's not a minhag. Yeah.
Sometimes there's also that particular...
Tosfos has a lashon, minig avosenu toirahi. Minig Yisrael toirahu, it says in a lot of poskim. A minig is called Torah. That's the... Yeah. Menachas. Yeah. And then there's an expression already in the old generations, minig oisis gehenim. Minig is the letters of Gehenim. So somebody once asked, when do you say it's a Torah, when do you say it's Gehenim? I said, it's Pasha. If it's my minig, it's Torah. If it's your minig, it's Gehenim. Yeah? That's what a lot of people think. If it's my minig, then it's Torah. If it's your minig, then it's craziness, it's Gehenim. But the real point is that there's two types of minhagim. There's a minig that's rooted in truth. It's a minig. It's not a halacha, you don't have to, but it's a minig. And then there's a minig that's rooted in fantasy and hallucinations and some person's obsessions.
What if a minute drives
In a wrong interpretation, and so that's like it just creates Gehenna for everybody. Just creates Gehenna for everybody. Then there's another issue, and another issue is that sometimes there's a minig that's an authentic minig, but the people are not ready for that minig. Right? And then you also have to understand that's not minig oisis Gehenna. But it means that sometimes you want to win the battle and you lose the war.
I'm abolished things sometimes when it was.
Yeah, in other words, you have to understand. In other words, if a minig is very, very precious, but the point of a minig was, the idea of a minig by the Jewish people is like, you buy your wife roses on Erev Shabbos, right? What's the idea? It's a gesture. You do it 4 weeks, and then the 5th week you don't bring roses, and you're dead. But the whole idea of it is, it's a gesture. It's a gift. It's not an obligation. It's a gift. The moment it becomes just a fixed duty that's dry and monotonous, it loses its whole purpose. The idea of minhagim is that Jews were displaying their romance, their affection, their special relationship. The idea of a minig, when you say, I do a minig miserably, it's a contradiction in terms. It's like, I brought flowers and I cursed when I gave the flowers. Like, take your flowers and throw it in the garbage. You understand? The whole idea is you're trying to show a love, a special sensitivity. So when the minig becomes the cause of anxiety and stress, it's the whole opposite of what a minig is. What do you need a minig for? The whole idea of a minig is you're going the extra mile, right? You don't have to do it. That's the point. Not a mitzvah. It's a minig. A minig means you don't have to. So why are you doing it? And the answer is because the Jewish people wanted to show their affection. I'm going the extra mile. I'm doing something special. So it's a sense of specialness. There's a joy there. If it's just causing anxiety and stress, you have to, something is off here. You have to explain to people what the minig is, what the point of it is. So I think that's just a general observation. I'm not saying we should abolish every minig that a child in the house doesn't like. What I'm saying is our attitude towards minhagim always has to be one of celebration and positivity, not one of more stress and anxiety. And in different situations, you have to judge, what's appropriate, and you have to monitor, because you don't want to be right and lose the person. It's extremely important.
It's a very hard balance.
I know. It's
Especially when you come from a place where so many that drives everybody nuts.
Right.
Sometimes a minig is something happened that has fellowship fish by vision.
Yeah, okay. In a chanam. Okay, that's true.
How to abolish minhagim.
But this is a very interesting thing. This was a minig from the Rishonim and Saloniki, right? Comes the Birkei Yosef and he quotes the Makubal, Maram Dilunzano, who calls it Marish Shigoyin. This is an act of craziness. Who is he saying this about? But his point was that it has absolutely no basis and you should not be doing this. We don't need cement on Pesach.
It wasn't a mitzvah. It wasn't a minhag of Klal Yisrael. It was a minhag just in
Of Saloniki. That's one place, but the Shibali Halakit also brings it. Okay.
So they still do it today. So a minig never is broken.
In Saloniki today is a very...
Nobody's there. Oh.
They don't do it.
The community of Saloniki was wiped out by the Holocaust. I don't know.
They also moved to
You have Jews, but not.
Rhodes, an island of Rhodes, moved to Seattle, centuries. They don't have it in Seattle.
Well, but you know for a fact.
I know for a fact I used to live in that community.
Okay, Zog the Gemara. Tana Rabbanon. Tana Rabbanon, the rabbis taught. After the Mishnah goes through what we do with the second cup, we pour the second cup and the child asks the questions and he goes through the Manashtan and you begin with disgrace and you end with praise and you darshan the whole pasuk of Aram, the whole section of Arami, Ovid Avi and Parshas Kisavai. So the Gemara says as follows. Tana Rabbanon, the rabbis taught in a brayso. Chacham b'nai, if the child is a chacham, he has perception and is wise, then shayaloi, then the child asks the questions of his father, as the Mishnah says. V'meini chacham. What if he doesn't have this sufficient knowledge or wisdom to ask? Ishtay shayaltoi. Then the person's wife should ask the questions. which is a fascinating brisa, because the Mishnah said that if the child has his own das, he asks his own questions. If not, his father teaches him to ask. But that's talking about still a child who you could teach. You could teach him to ask the manishtana, and he'll understand what you're teaching him. He's not going to ask it on his own, but if you teach it to him, he'll ask the question. Now the brisa is talking about a child, not only does he not ask on his own, you can't even teach him to ask. In other words, it's not going to work. That's stage 3. There's stage 1, he'll ask himself. Stage 2, you could teach him and educate him. Aviv melamdoi, to ask. And this is stage 3 in the brisa, that he doesn't even have that ability to ask, even if you teach him. So now the brisa says something new, that what there should always be an exchange of questions and answers, and therefore his wife asks the question. V'im lav, what happens if he doesn't have a wife? So he doesn't have her to ask the questions. He's himself. Hu shaya la'atzmai. He asks himself the question. Because the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim has to happen always through question and answer. Shaila and Shuva. And this is rooted in Chumash. It says, V'haya ki yish'olcha vincha machar. When your child asks you, you should answer. So therefore, if you have nobody to ask the question, ask yourself the question, manishtana, so that this tradition is preserved. You'll say, but well, you're asking yourself and you're answering. So if you're answering, what do you have to ask? The idea of a question is somebody asks me because he doesn't know, and then I answer him because I do know. But if I'm asking myself the question, nonetheless, there has to be the question, the curiosity, and then the answer.
Does he have to articulate it? Does he have to verbalize it?
Yeah, he actually asks. Manishtana laylaza. Yeah, I want to ask myself 4 questions. Manishtana laylaza mikol alaylas. And you go through the question, and then you say, now let me answer. It's a fascinating halacha.
We said yesterday that if you know the answer, you're not mechuyev to ask.
Huh?
We said yesterday that if you know the answers, you understand it all. You don't. I know, but we said that you're not mechuyev to ask.
No, we learned 2 shittas. There's a shitta of Rashi and the Rashbam, and the shitta of Toys. The shitta of Rashi and Rashbam is that if the child asks any question, you could skip the manishtana. You could just go to Avodah Mayinu. As long as he asks the question. For example, why are we pouring the second cup? Now, and then there's a shitta of Toys who says, no, the manishtana is, the Chachamim fixed the question, that should be asked. Even if he asks some of the other questions. Yes, that's what we see here. And even if it's 2 Talmidei Chachamim, great Torah scholars who know all the halachas of Pesach, Shoyalin zelazeh, they ask each other the question. In other words, don't think it's only for the children or those who are children intellectually to teach them what they don't know, and therefore he who knows doesn't have to tell the story and certainly doesn't have to ask questions. No. They have to tell the story to each other, and they have to ask questions from each other. And that's what we say in the beginning of the Haggadah. Afilu kolano chachamim, kolano nevainim, kolano yodim esatayra. Mitzvah leinu l'saper b'yitzias Mitzrayim. So one asks the manishtana, and the other Talmud Chacham answers the manishtana.
So if we have a Talmud Chacham sitting at your table and a wife, who should ask?
Seems like the wife comes first. That's where the wife comes first.
The Nesiv Shalom says something beautiful, which is that if the Tati is a shtickle amaretz, and he has great sons that are big Rebbeim and Dayanim and Talmid Hachamim, still the Tati has to tell the story to the sons, because that's the way the Emunah.
Father to child. Father has to tell it to the child. The Mishnah said, Manishtana alayla zamikol alayla shebechol alaylos. This was the girsa, the text the Gemara had. What's the difference between this night to all the other nights? The first question is, all the nights we dip once, and tonight we dip twice. Asks the Gemara, Maskif larav, I don't understand. Atu kol yoyma lo sagad lo matbel echad azimna. Every day, is it not good if a person doesn't dip even once? There's no obligation to dip once every night of the year. What does it mean? B'chol ha'leilos anu matbilin pa'amachas. Is it really insufficient if you don't dip once every night? There's no such an obligation. I mean, you could. When we asked It's not a question. It doesn't mean you have to eat vegetables every night. It just means you don't have to search for maror every night. Tonight you have to search for maror. So it doesn't mean that you have to eat vegetables every other night. It just means you don't have to search for maror. You can eat any vegetable you want. But when you say here, "B'chol haleilos anu matbilin pa'am achas," we dip once. It sounds like every single night we dip once. Where do you have a tradition or a custom or an obligation that every night you have to dip once? You don't have to dip anything any night. That's the question. So the Gemara says, Ela Amar Rava, wrong text. Hachi katani. This is how the Mishnah has to read. Shabachala leilis einanu chayavin l'tabel afilu pa'amachas alayla zed shtei pa'amim. All nights we're not obligated to dip even once. And tonight twice. The karpas in the dip and the maror in the charoisis. It's 2 dips. Maskefla Reb Safra questioned this text as well because it sounds like we have to. Einanu chayavin chiyuva l'dardeki. The first dip, which is just done for the children, you're calling a chiyuv? In other words, a chiyuv means what we call an absolute obligation. The second dip, we have to eat maror. There's a mitzvah to eat maror, so it's called a chiyuv. And there's a mitzvah to dip the maror in charoisis, however you explain the charoisis. So that you could call a chiyuv. But the first dip, even though the chachamim wanted it to happen, you can't call it a chiyuv. It's like an obligation. It was just to trigger the curiosity of the children. So that's what he's saying. Chiyuv l'dardeki? Are you calling this a chiyuv when it's really only made to trigger the curiosity of the children? Elamar Reb Safra hachi katani. This is how it has to read. B'chol haleilis einanu matbilin afilu pa'amachas halayla zed shtei pa'amim. He takes out the word chayavin. All nights of the year we don't dip even once. And tonight we dip twice. He doesn't use the word einanu chayavin afilu pa'amachas halayla zed shtei pa'amim. And that's indeed the text that we say today at the Seder. Right? B'chol haleilis einanu matbilin afilu pa'amachas halayla zed shtei pa'amim, as Reb Safra did it. Now the truth is, in the time of the Mishnah, they used to eat everything through dipping. That was the way of eating. They would take their food and dip it. But they would not eat vegetables before the meal. Once you washed and you sat down to eat bread, you ate vegetables. To eat vegetables before the meal, like we do by the Seder, was completely uncharacteristic. That's what the child is saying. A whole year, they used to always dip. The answer is, but in the middle of the meal. They wouldn't dip once before the meal. Right? This first dip that we have, they didn't have because they wouldn't dip any time before the meal. That's what he means. But halayla hazeh, we dip twice, and both times is before the main meal. The first time it's even before we wash, and the second time is after we eat the matzah, but before we eat the meal, because it's before Shulchan Aruch. That's what the Rishonim clarify. Maschil bignus.
Is it a strange question that Charles should ask this when they didn't reach the second dipping?
You're saying, how does the child know that we dip twice?
He was taught.
Because he was taught that we're going to dip twice.
So why is he asking the question? He knows already. I mean,
Well, it's not a frequent event. During the year, they dipped only once.
Well, the Mishnah says that his father taught him the question. So he taught him that we're going to dip maror and charaisa. So he asks that. Maschil begnusum masayim b'shvach. The Mishnah says the structure of the Haggadah is you begin with disgrace and you end with praise. You begin with the darkness and you end with the light. Frag the Gemara, my bignus. What does this mean, you begin bignus? Rava Marav says, Mitchila oivde avodas gilulim hayu aviseinu. That's how you begin. You begin telling the story that our forefathers were steeped in avodas gilulim, in idolatry. Va'achshav, and then now kervanu hamakam la'avodase. Hashem brought us to serving Him. Because Terach, our great grandfather, the father of Avraham Avinu, was steeped in idolatry, and even Avraham Avinu, as a child, as a baby, followed the tradition and the upbringing of his father until Avraham Avinu on his own discovered the truth of God, the truth of monotheism. So even Avraham Avinu, in the beginning of his life, there's different opinions in Chazal when he recognized by the Rambam says when he was 40, some places says 48, some places say 3. But the point is, even Avraham Avinu was steeped in the Avodah Zarah of his father Terach. So that's what it means, Maschil Bignus. We begin with the primitiveness, with the time that our forefathers were steeped in darkness and primitiveness and superstition and paganism. Shmuel says, Avodim hayinu l'farim b'Mitzrayim. The gnus doesn't refer to the spiritual enslavement to idolatry, but it refers to the enslavement of Parai in Egypt. So when the Mishnah says maschil bignus u'mesayim b'shvach, we have a very interesting dispute what this means. From Rav's perspective, it's talking about the spiritual development of the Jewish people, from a state of idolatry to a state of enlightenment, of discovering the truth of the universe. And according to Shmuel, it's about the physical enslavement to Parai in Egypt and the subsequent emancipation. That's the machloikas between Rav and Shmuel. Shmuel holds that we're celebrating Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why are we speaking about other things? Why are you speaking about the Avodah Zarah of Terach, the Avodah Zarah of Avram Avinu? Rav holds, it seems, that the primary focus is not just the physical emancipation, but also spiritual emancipation. And that's why we celebrate it tonight, that we became his nation, that we became a divine people. So we start all the way from the beginning. Now, our Haggadah, of course, includes both opinions. Right after the Manishtana, we start off, Avodim hayinu l'farei b'Mitzrayim, v'yetzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham b'yad chazak v'zirei nituya. But a few sections later in the Haggadah, we start off, Mitchila oivdei avodah zarah haya v'seinu, v'ashav kevon ha'malkim la'avodasi. So we actually synthesize both opinions, Rav and Shmuel. And that's the idea that maschil b'gnus, you always begin with the gnus. That the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim is not that you're always in a good place. It means that redemption means that there's challenges, there's difficulties. I'm steeped in slavery or primitiveness, and from there the redemption happens. That's the re-experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Doesn't happen by ignoring the negativity. It's by understanding that in the beginning there is the gnus, and from there you develop into the shvach. So according to Rav, the gnus is avodah zarah, and the shvach is the emancipation of avodah zarah. And according to Shmuel, the gnus is avdus, enslavement, and the shvach is the liberation from enslavement. Vayetzeinu Hashem Elokeinu. Zog the Gemara, Amar lei Reb Nachman ledoru avdei. This is the night of Pesach, the night of the Seder. Reb Nachman had a slave, a servant, and his name was Doru. So the night of the Seder, Reb Nachman turns to his slave Doru and he says like this: Avda de mafik le mori lecherus. A slave that his master took him out from slavery to freedom. He emancipated him. V'yoyiv le kaspa v'dava. Then the master gives him silver and gives him gold. This is what Reb Nachman is asking his slave. A slave whose master emancipates him and gives him silver and gold. My boy le. What should this slave tell the master? Amalei Daru tells his master Reb Nachman, Boyli duye ule shabuche. This slave ought to thank, to express gratitude and praise to the master. Amalei, Reb Nachman says, Patarton miloymar manishtana. You have exempted us from saying manishtana. Pasach v'yamar. Instead, Reb Nachman begins the Seder and starts with Avodim hayinu l'parei b'Mitzrayim. Now, this is a fascinating story. What happened here? What was Reb Nachman's point? Why doesn't he have to say the Manishtana? What's the connection? So it's interesting that if you look in the Rashbam, right? He says Pasach v'amar la'achar she'elas haben hischilaimer Avodim hayinu. The Rashbam didn't have in his Gemara the words Patartin Malayma Manishtana. It just Pasach v'Amar Avodim hayinu, meaning he asked the slave the question, his slave answered, the child asked Manishtana, and then Reb Nachman said Avodim hayinu. V'goymer Haggadah b'shvach v'hidah. And he continued and completed the Haggadah with a sense of praise and gratitude. Keloymar, Kein Asalana Kadosh Baruch Hu Sheyinu Avodim V'Tzionu Misham. Reb Nachman wanted to illustrate for himself and his family why we're celebrating. So basically, we learn from here that Reb Nachman, he gave new life to his Seder. The children of the Einiklach are sitting around. Reb Nachman didn't just say we're doing the Haggadah. He had a conversation with Daru. Daru responded. Reb Nachman said, you hear what's going on. So now, this is our story. We were slaves. The master emancipated us, plus gave us silver and gold because the Jewish people went out with enormous wealth. And now we can appreciate the Haggadah. So that's how the Rashbam understands the story. Reb Nachman was really trying to bring it home, to illustrate the point for himself and I guess for his family or for the guests, that they should be able to experience the Seder in a much more meaningful and relevant and profound way, which I guess is a very profound lesson that you sometimes have to improvise. You have to create conversation and illustrations that make it real and authentic for the people living in that time, because Daru is a living slave right now, and he could speak about it right now, right? So imagine if you had at your Seder, if you're living 1865 in the South, right? 1865 in the South. I think Lincoln was assassinated on Pesach. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on Pesach. So you're living 1865 in the South, and you turn to the slave and you say, what does it feel like to have been emancipated by President Lincoln? And the slave tells you, you say, okay, chavre, now avadim hayir lepareh b'Mitzrayim. That would be the equivalent in contemporary, I mean, not mamish contemporary, but closer to home than Reb Nachman's time. Really, he tried to bring it home, and that was the point of what Reb Nachman did with his slave Daru. The question is, according to the regular Girsa in the Gemara, it says, Patartan milaymar manishtana. So the Rashbam obviously deletes it because he says clearly that the child asks. So obviously he did not have that. That's why after Patartan, I don't know if you have it by you, but you see that there's some. The Rashbam basically is not guidus this, and we just learned before that you have to have questions and answers, and even if you don't have a child, your wife asks, and even yourself you have to ask. So why would Reb Nachman say that you don't have to ask the manishtana? That is why from the Rashbam you see clearly that he deletes these words. In other words, Reb Nachman just said avadim hayinu, and Reb Nachman did have to say the manishtana, and the reason the Gemara doesn't mention it is because it's obvious. That is one way of looking at it. The question is, according to the Gersa Patartim Eloi Manishtana, how are we supposed to understand this? So I saw two interpretations. One, I saw in the Haggadah of the Malbim. The Malbim has a Haggadah, his commentary on the Haggadah, and in a footnote there, he brings this Gemara, and he gives a fascinating interpretation. And he says that there's a Gemara, I believe in Masechta Menachos, about, I think Baba Kama actually. Reb Nachman was speaking about slaves. And Reb Nachman once said that the money, the food with which you feed your slave, is worth much more than when you get from him. The work that your slave does for you is not worth the money that you invest in feeding him, which means it's basically a bad investment, because you have to feed the slave and give him room and give him board, and what do you get from him? Bupkis. That's what Reb Nachman says. So the Gemara says, no, that was Reb Nachman's slave. The Gemara says Reb Nachman had a slave Daru. What would he do? This is what the Gemara says. He would dance at night in all the bars. He would basically make litzanas in Batya. He would go from bar to bar and dance. He had fun. That was his slave.
It was a second job for Dara in the Gemara. He made a couple bucks.
Could be that's where he made a couple of bucks. But the point is, Reb Nachman's slave did whatever he wanted. Okay? This is the Malbim brings this Gemara, and he says, now you'll understand the answer. Now you'll understand the Gemara. Reb Nachman didn't turn to a slave who was being whipped, who was being beaten. The slaves in the South who could be lynched, who could be hung, who could be tortured, who felt they have no identity. Reb Nachman's slave had a very, very good life. Okay, he did basically whatever he wanted. And he asked this slave, and he said, if somebody would free you, you're a slave, what would you feel? And he said, this person has to praise and be maida. And the Malbim says, Boili iduya ula shabuche. He uses two words, iduya and shabuchi. Why two words? Boile iduya. Iduya means to thank, like moida. Toda. Iduya means to thank. Hoida, moidim. Why say l'shabuchi? Lo iduya, you thank. You say thank you. What's l'shabuche? Praise. But he says, what's the difference? Thanking means thank you so much for your kindness, your generosity. I appreciate. That's already praise. Every thank you is a praise, right? Because I'm praising you for what you did, even if you had to do it. Certainly, if you didn't have to do it, if it was completely voluntary, you gave me a gift and you didn't have to. When I'm thanking you, I'm praising your generosity and your kindness and your sensitivity, etc. The word shvach actually in halacha means shvach peris, shvach damim, means the interest. Things that grow are called shvach. Shvach peris means I give you a field, and then the field grows fruits, and it becomes more expensive. Shvach literally means it becomes better. When you speak about money and the interest it makes, it's called the shvach, the extra interest that was created. The Malbim says in the pasuk in Ashrei, Dor ledor yishabach ma'asecho ugvorisechi yagidu. Generation to generation, they're going to praise your deeds. He says yishabach doesn't mean they'll praise your deeds in every generation. Dor ledor, in every generation, it's like interest. It's compounded because he says with each generation we discover the secrets of science and physics in a whole new way. So it's yishabach ma'asecha. It gets better and better, right? We used to think that a cell was a pretty simple little tiny creature over there. Now suddenly with our new discoveries, we discovered the genome, the DNA. Whoa. This is no random isa. It used to be easier to say that a cell happened randomly. Today, to say that a cell happened randomly is very, very difficult intellectually, unless you're really, really invested in getting rid of God. But dor ledor, every generation, yishabach, it becomes better and better. So he says the Eved doesn't just say boyili duya, thanking, but it's even more than that. It's l'shabuche. That's the diuk here. L'shabuche, much more than lo duya. And that's even daru. With more time, he appreciates it more. So even a slave like this, who was pretty free, still it's not like being a free person. Yes, he danced all night wherever he wanted. He danced all night in the bars. He was given free room, free board, but you're still a servant. To be free, to be independent is a unique quality in life. And with more time, you appreciate it more. You don't take it, usually we say with more time, you take it for granted. Here the idea is, l'eduya l'shabuche. So the Malbim says, this is what Reb Nachman was trying to show everybody. That even this guy, he does whatever he wants. Still, independence is a special gift. And it's a gift that you appreciate even more with time. So he said, if that's the case, patartun milayma manishtana. Why did the Chazal say you have to ask questions and you have to answer answers? He says it was one reason. The questions is always there to make it real. When you just say something without a question, you may get it or you may not get it. The question is to visualize it, to illustrate it, to internalize it. He says now the Seder will be able to be internalized, so we don't have to ask the questions. Manishtana, we could go straight to Avodah Mayinu because we have here Daru to give us the insight, the appreciation of what Yitzias Mitzrayim is, even generations, thousands of years later. L'huduya u'l'shabuche. It gets better and better. That's the Malbim's interpretation. I saw another interpretation, a little more abstract, a sefer called Lahiris Nasan, and he says that the idea of questions and answers is, you already answered last year, why are you asking a question this year? The idea is that every year you have to discover a deeper layer of Yitzias Mitzrayim. So I had an answer last year, but I have a new question this year. I'm not repeating the same question. I'm trying to discover a deeper layer. Right? The Baal Shem Tov once said every answer has a question, and every question has an answer, but every answer has a question. So for last year was an answer, but now I have to discover yet a deeper layer. So therefore, there is a new question. So they bring in the back here in the Masifta Gemara from the Sefer Lahiris Nasan. So he says this is how you have to understand the Gemara. That every year I want to experience a new dimension of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Chachamim say, ask a question, basically saying that what I understood last year still was not the real thing. It was a very limited perception. And after everything, we still have the questions. And we have to go to a deeper layer. Amarti achakma v'hi rechoika mimeni. The more wisdom, the more distant it becomes. So he says, this is what happened with Reb Nachman. This is what happened with Reb Nachman. Reb Nachman said, if you go free, what do you have to do? So he said, Lu duyo l'shabuche, right? Haidaya is you thank once. Shvach, as we said, increases. It's like the dividends, the interest. Shvach peiris. In other words, it gets better and better because every generation is Yeshabach Masecha. So when the servant said, not only li'duya but also l'shabuche, he revealed that he understands it's not enough to thank once for what happened by Yetzias Mitzrayim, but l'shabuche. It's endless, it's infinite. Each year there's a deeper praise, a deeper awareness. So Reb Nachman said, if so, we don't have to say Manishtana, because the whole point of Manishtana is to challenge us to go yet into a deeper layer of Yetzias Mitzrayim. But this servant already explained to us this very concept by the way he understood how you have to respond to the gift of liberty and emancipation. That's the Lahiris Nossen's explanation. That's why Reb Nachman did what he did. Zog the Gemara. Okay, this is a new Mishnah, so we'll stop here. According to this, he said you don't have to say Manashtana. You could just go straight to Avodah Mayino. In other words, that the objective of Manashtana has been fulfilled. The objective of Manashtana is
We said always that you just say it anyway because that's what they were sacking.
But according to him, you didn't have to. It's not an intrinsic obligation. It's an obligation with a purpose. And once the purpose was met, you don't have to do it, according to this explanation. The Rashbam obviously disagrees. He takes it out.
Right.
But according to this interpretation, you Pasha don't have to say the Manashtana because the Manashtana has a purpose. And we already did the purpose.
Is there maybe the entire Maggid is like this? As long as you fulfill the purpose, explain anything that happened and everything else. Why do you have to follow the canonical structure of the text?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Let's say somebody can read the whole Haggadah, right? And the kids don't know what's flying. Or he could sit with them and actually explain. Right? Where did you do the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? Obviously, the person who communicated in a way that they got it.
Like a teacher saying to
Like a teacher with students, yeah.
it's not a command.
Yeah.
You read and nobody
Yeah, but like in everything in Yiddishkeit, mitzvah, it says mitzvah b'loy kavan, it could go b'loy neshama. Mitzvah without kavan, it could be like a body without a soul. On the other hand, the text of the Haggadah is the text that Chazal chose to convey the story. So that's why we use that text, obviously, and the text has,
obviously the father reads the text.
tremendous symbolism and significance, yeah. But in other words, there's an objective here. The objective is not just reading words and screaming at everybody to stay in quiet. The objective is to communicate the story.
Yeah, it's like if you want to be captivating, the experience should be captivating. You probably use
Right,
the power of speech.
right. That's what Reb Nachman wanted. He obviously wanted to captivate the audience. The Malbim is an interesting word, that this slave was free, but still he felt special. So he said, in every generation, even though you weren't in Mitzrayim, you could still appreciate that gift of independence. It's not a one-time gift.
They were free.
Yeah,
Now.
because that Eved was pretty free. Yeah. Still, he was very appreciative. That's why he asked us. He wanted to show his children that the freedom is a gift.
Might have thought he's going to free. Might have thought he's going to free.
Why should Dara want to go free? He had a wonderful time.
I think also
Yet even he understood that there's something about being free. Even Daro. Working for yourself, entrepreneur.
I observed that a lot of Russian Jews, by they use their own stories how they went out in Israel because they appreciate independence so much
Oh, yeah.
more than Americans.
Yeah.
Because we know what it means to not have. I mean, those people who went to the
He grew up in the Soviet Union.
So it's like my father, you know, he'll say, oh, on December 6th, 1987, that was the day.
The Iron Curtain. There were also survivors. The night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, they would talk about their experiences in the Holocaust and their liberation.
Something the Haggadah doesn't have personal experiences in it.
That's the point, yeah.
We're supposed to feel like we went out, but there's nothing personal in it.
Right, right,
It's just saying, well, what happened during down, what
Right.
happened during good.
right.